now we get Laszlo to ourselves for some questions. I've got a number of them, if you can imagine, but I want to share him with you, as it were. Laszlo, thank you. First, big question. You went from building Google until it was gargantuan, and now you're at a startup. Just what's the difference in the two?
Well, there's two big differences. One is I feel a much greater sense of responsibility. I mean, anytime you have a job, you feel a sense of responsibility. But when you're at a startup, and I've got amazing co-founders, everyone who joins you is taking this leap of faith. And if your idea doesn't work, if what you're doing, if the team isn't right, they're out of a job. Like, the consequence is much closer and more immediate and severe. And the second is, it is an incredible blessing to work with the colleagues I have on this mission. I mean, some of the best, kindest, most thoughtful people I've ever encountered in my life. So it's great.
What about the transition? I mean, you know, you've talked about having a family. Clearly that was affected by the fact that you worked with 70,000 people every day, and you went to work knowing that you had this giant company that was literally changing the world and doing all these Google things. Is it just a different life to now be at a small startup where maybe the spotlight is not nearly as bright, and maybe you have a little more freedom? Not a lot more freedom.
Yeah, I don't miss the spotlight at all. The spotlight sucks. It's really,
Sorry about that.
yeah, it's, well, it shines off my head in a way that's really not very flattering. No, it's, so what my family tells me is even though the hours may be longer, I'm much more present and happier and less stressed. And I think it's because, and you can do this in your day job, but it underscores to me the importance of finding something that's really aligned with your values. And Google aligned with a lot of my values, not all of them. And it's a great, tremendous company. But to do something that's purely tied to what you care about, and what I care the most about is work just sucks. You know, there's 4 billion people for who work, and you spend more time doing that than anything else in your life, right? Like, you go through life, the mythology is you like go through life, you're going to find this person you're meant to be with, you're going to spend your entire life with them, and then you spend more time with these bozos at work than, not my current work, than this person you like searched your whole life. So to be able to focus on that is really liberating and a real blessing.
You talked a lot about culture. There have been a lot of books. It's sort of trendy now to write books about Silicon Valley, whether it's about Twitter or Elon Musk or, you know, Wired or whatever it is. And yet they all kind of come back to culture, even if they're writing about different industries or whatever. And it's rarely positive. The chapter or chapters on culture are rarely positive. It's about the old boys network. Mm-hmm. It's about how money corrupts. It's about sexism in the workplace. And this is something you brought up a lot. Mm-hmm. How important is culture, and how much are we in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley holding ourselves back from doing better things?
We're holding ourselves back a lot, and I think it's driven by two things. Because I think tech in general has a cultural problem. And by the way, part of it is, in 2014, at Google, we decided to make our diversity statistics public. And a bunch of other companies did the same. The financial services industry did not choose to do that. Consumer products did not choose to. Manufacturing chose not to make their numbers public. When you make your numbers public, it will forever put pressure on the leadership team. That's one of the reasons we did it. Because we knew even if there was a change in CEO, you're going to have that pressure because it's public and out there. It also puts a target on you. CFO at Google came from Morgan Stanley, and she said, yeah, Google's actually a much better place from a culture perspective for women, for people who are black, for people who are Latinx than Morgan Stanley. But Morgan Stanley's not pilloried every day for cultural issues, right? Because they didn't wave the flag. That said, I think there's two core problems with culture in Silicon Valley. One is that leaders don't have the courage to just stand up and take the right position. It's the classic, like, you've got a great salesperson who's a jerk. Do you fire the person? Yeah, you fire the person. That's pretty clear to me. But it's really hard to do that. The second is when you get down, even when you're at the top layer, you have leaders who say, we agree, diversity is important, or inclusion, or we care about harassment. At the next layer down, they tend not to follow through as much. Because it's easy in the CEO staff meeting to go like, yeah, that's really important. It's much harder to go to your next layer down and say, this is important, we're going to hire differently, and at the whiff of a harassment issue or what have you, we're just going to fire that person and get them out the office the next day. It takes courage, and it needs to cascade through the organization. And I don't think most of the leaders in Silicon Valley are bad people. They're good people. It's just there's a lot more IQ than EQ, and a lot more focus on, like, let me analyze this and think through the implications, and less focus on, like, there's a human being here. And what message am I sending if I allow certain behavior to persist?
You know, Uber just had its IPO, and I know you didn't call them out by name, but that's kind of my job. They just had their IPO. They came with huge cultural problems, and a CEO who vowed to change it and has made some changes. Is there a correlation at all between some of those problems that we saw and maybe a lack of enthusiasm on the financial side? I mean, could we possibly be making a link between culture and money?
I would argue yes. And the reason is companies that have cultural issues, there's basically two ways to make a bunch of money. And at the extremes, you're very profitable. In the transitions, it's kind of hard to tell. So one is kind of, and I haven't read up on what's happening lately, but my favorite example from years ago was Foxconn, right? Foxconn, you remember like 7 or 8 years ago, people were committing suicide by jumping off the roofs of 4-story buildings. And their solution was, let's install nets between the first and second floor to catch people. And so the suicide rate went down. The number of attempts, not so much. But you can grind through people and make a bunch of money. At the other extreme, you can give people tremendous freedom, build a great culture, attract higher quality talent, and be successful. I think part of what's happening is when companies are trying to navigate this, and I don't know Dara, and I'm not too deep, I'm not deep with what's happening inside Uber. When you're making that transition, it's really hard and it's a distraction. You're sort of flushing people who are part of the old guard and the old culture. People in the company aren't sure if the transition's there, and that shows up in how the company performs, particularly once you're a few thousand, 5,000, 10,000, I don't know how big they are. So I'm not surprised that that kind of thing would have an impact. I don't have the data on them specifically.
The reason I ask is now you have built one of the more successful companies of our time. You're now building another company. Is there a way to build so that you don't get to the point where you're asked constantly, that person is a jerk, do we have to fire them? I mean, is there a way to somehow screen for that sort of thing?
For the most part, there's a couple steps to it. One is, as I mentioned, most people we interview, we screen by our gut. Do I like the person? Do I connect? There's research from Tricia Prickett and Neha Jain, who are professors at, I think, the University of Ohio, or they were PhD students at the time, about how people interview. And what they found was, basically, you make a decision about hiring somebody in the first 10 seconds. And then the rest is something called confirmation bias. So subconsciously, you've made a decision and you're just looking for reasons. The answer is really boring. Use structured interview questions, ask every candidate the same question, and nobody does that because it's boring to do. Like, it's no fun as an interview to ask somebody, tell me about a time when you solved an analytically difficult problem. Tell me about a time when your ethics were challenged, and to ask every single person those same questions. But if you do that, you actually see across people. The other thing is, I think actually, for executive hires, companies are too slow to fire. I think for executive hires, for startups at least, 30 days in, you've kind of got a read on, is this work going really well or not so well? And you typically should exit that person, particularly if there's a cultural issue, because otherwise you make the mistake of spending 3, 6, 9 months working with that person. They disrupt the team. The company's saying, what do I do? And that signaling really matters, particularly at the senior levels.
There's sort of a San Francisco business conundrum right now where the two dominant themes are, wow, look at all this innovation and success, and even in many cases profitability. We are thriving, driving the stock market higher, employment record highs. On the other hand, people say, I can't do business in San Francisco. For one thing, I can't afford to live there. For the other thing, it's dirty. There's just such inequality in how we do that. Is there a way to bridge that, and are we not at some sort of risk of losing the dominant place? You know, we've called it Silicon Valley, but we can even, zero in on San Francisco, and having people at some point in the very near future say, well, I'd love to work for you, but I can live over here with my family and appreciate the education and have safer streets over here instead of the Bay Area. Are we at risk there?
Absolutely. Every large company I know that has a big presence or headquarters in San Francisco has a multi-location strategy. Austin's popular, Boulder's popular, a whole bunch of lower cost. And that's building on top of having folks get hired in India or Eastern Europe where the cost of living is more reasonable and wages are lower. It's a real problem. It's not one I have deep expertise in. So what I'd humbly submit, though, is a couple things. One is that I think the challenge for hiring in this area is certainly an economic one. Like there's war for talent and huge inequality. But there's a human component, which is what kind of lives do you want the people in your company to have? I mean, you probably know the statistics better than I, but to be the threshold for sort of lower quartile income in San Francisco is something like 100,000, 150,000.
Right, and that's for the lower.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, And you think about what we all wanted growing up, right? The picket fence, the house in the suburbs, the yard for the kids to play in. It's just not attainable. And so if you think about what's the compassionate thing for your workforce, you either decide, well, we can't be here, or what can we do to make those opportunities exist for people? And what that requires is, outreach. It's reaching out to community colleges. I thought that was a beautiful example about Retail Ready. It's reaching out to organizations like Code Tenderloin, which is an organization, it's a nonprofit here in San Francisco, which works with unhoused people and teaches them coding skills. And I'm not saying that's going to give you like the greatest AI engineer in the world. But what I saw in my old job, and without partnership with Code Tenderloin, I didn't learn about it until recently. But you hire somebody for, a tech support job. And from that tech support job, they can sort of ratchet up to like, site reliability engineering. And from there, they can ratchet up to software engineering. And it takes time. But creating those opportunities for people is incumbent. And I think every company should have a strategy where they say, like, there's 10 or 20 organizations or colleges I'm going to partner with. Or even better, I was unsuccessful in this. I tried to get Intel and IBM and Google to partner to work on inclusion in the tech industry, because I figured we didn't exactly compete for talent. But find some other companies you don't compete with and say, like, okay, we're going to together pick these schools. And don't involve the CEO, don't involve the CHRO. Get people at a lower level and just start doing it. And 3 years later, you'll start seeing results. It's a much bigger question you ask that I don't have a solution for, but it's a huge problem that we should all be like working on and actively thinking about how to solve.
You brought up a couple of I guess, skills, jobs, when you were talking about your book, HR and training. And I had to smile. My dad was always in HR, my mom training in Oakland where I grew up. And I must admit, hearing their, how was your day, honey, kind of conversation was like, oh my God. My sister and I were like, we're going to get in the workforce and it's HR and training. Yet, the book you say made $1 million. And are there two, more important subsets of jobs these days? And they may not be the sexiest, but they sound really important when it comes to company culture and growing that company. Speak on that a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think it's, in economic terms, HR is an undervalued asset, right? So part of the reason I went into HR, I had a miserable career, all kinds of random jobs. I graduated college. I was lucky enough to do that. My brother never went to college. And my first job after college that was a full-time job was being a waiter at the Olive Garden, right? Like, it was not what you expect from going to like a fancy liberal arts college, right? And so I stumbled around, ended up at McKinsey & Company, and then chose to go into HR. And part of the epiphany was it's an incredibly pivotal, important field. It's not one that attracts people who are analytically minded, quantitatively skilled, have sort of a broader business skill. Just because you sort of end up in HR if you like, people say like, oh, you like people, you're really charming, you should be in HR. So the field has this opportunity to bring like science and analytics to it in exactly the way that happened in manufacturing in the 1900s and in the 1950s following World War II, in exactly the way that happened in the 1970s and 80s with advertising, when Time Inc. sort of went from, when advertising went from like these full-page ads which had lots of text in them to Time Inc. having this amazing consumer database saying we're going to target ads and resell our customer list to other companies. That's happening, and then Google and Facebook, of course, like turned the dial up to 11. That's happening now in HR. And about a third of the people who get hired into CHRO jobs come from outside the field. So it's true at Deloitte, it's true at Intuit, it's true at Starbucks, it's true at Microsoft. It's actually true at Google right now. So there's a huge opportunity for transformation, but it requires some talent infusion and a fundamentally different mindset and comfort with data and science and technology.
I was going to say, you almost started to answer my next question, because you talk about a transformation and it sounds like you're talking about real humans.
Yeah.
When we talk about technology, people get nervous. Well, our privacy, our data, all that stuff. And yet, to build companies, you're saying we really need the human touch.
Yeah.
How do we keep that when everybody, even some of the companies you mentioned, are going full bore on, look at all this amazing technology that can automate everything?
Mm-hmm. It's a real risk, and you see, quite frankly, almost more harm than good happening. There's a big tech company, I won't name this one because it's not a constructive example, but they built an algorithm to help with hiring. They had a very smart group of engineers, and they said, let's screen employees, and because they trained on the data of existing employees, their algorithm had the effect of screening out women. And then when confronted with this, they did two things. They said, well, it only ran for 2 years. This is a company that hires tens of thousands of people a year, right? So 2 years means a lot of women didn't get jobs. And the second is they said, well, and we changed the algorithm to remove the phrases and words that signal whether somebody is a woman or not. And what's nuts about that is that's not how algorithms work. The way algorithms work is you say, here's the outcome we're looking for, and here's a bunch of data. So if you remove words like the names of sororities and things like that, the algorithm finds another way. It finds other signals to generate the same discriminatory outcome. So you have to what's tricky about this is you need this union of computer science, behavioral science, and to be honest, like either people who have like incredible EQ or incredible compassion or background in HR to kind of go like, yeah, this is probably going to have the wrong effect. And there's not enough organizations combining those things in the right way, because each one of those, if you do HR by itself, it won't be scientific and analytically driven. If you do technology by itself, it's going to be discriminatory. If you do behavioral science by itself, it's not going to be scalable. So you need to unify and bring together those inside your companies, or look for those in the organizations you partner with, and that's the path.
It seems like when it comes to AI, let's say, and machine learning, there are those dangers. I remember when Google talked about how it used AI and machine learning to help it translate. And at the time, I was literally taking Russian. And I noticed over the months in a couple of years that Google Translate became amazingly better. And I was told, well, that's machine learning. And then, right.
Well, no, I got to review your personal records. It was really compelling. So thank you for your contribution.
You're laughing,
Just
but
kidding.
he reviewed yours as well. I'm not that interested. But right, so there's an example of a machine getting better, and that helped individuals learn a language. On the other hand, right, if you use AI and program it to be like everybody you already are, or the people who already work with you, how are you going to get more diverse? It seems like you're kind of working against that, right?
Absolutely, 100%. We had one thing so two things kind of unrelated. One is you touched on privacy and ethics before. That's like the most important thing in the world. And for me at least, because I was born literally in a country where like school children were asked, by their parents, what did your teacher say? Did they say the government's not good? Did they say they don't believe in the party? And then people would disappear, right? So that was the culture. So privacy is the most important thing. Without that, you can't do the right thing for people. You can't protect them from corporations, from government. So you need a privacy and ethics framework for how you do all these things. And any company you partner with or talk to, or even within your companies, that's got to be the number one thing. The second thing, though, is that I totally forgot where your question was going.
You had talked about how the company sort of ended up just cloning itself instead of being more diverse.
Yeah, so this is why I think you need this union of fields. So shortly after I joined Google, and caveat, this is because I'm a huge comic book nerd and we were all total nerds, a guy on the team named Todd Carlisle, PhD in org psych, did a study of what predicts success at Google. And he was able to narrow it down. It was called Project Cerebro, which is the thing Professor X uses to find mutants. And this was before X-Men were cool. So I saw it, I was like, that's the best name ever. And he's like, yeah, people keep making fun of me. And the R squared, our ability to predict whether somebody would be successful or not, was on the order of 30 to 40%, 0.3 to 0.4, which for social sciences is like off the charts. It means you can predict about 30 to 40% of job performance from this short questionnaire we developed. The engineers said that's garbage. Because when somebody starts typing Nike shoes, search needs to know you're looking for this in this area and all these things. They built their own product. It had to be better, so it was called SETI, after the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, so not just the Earth, like the universe. And they made the same mistake Amazon did. They trained on existing data, and they ended up recommending the best way to find great people for Google is people who went to Stanford and Carnegie Mellon and Caltech, right? Same people who are already there. And this is the exercise your companies should do. The study then we did was I secretly, without telling management, hired 200 people into Google who were rejected by Google. Sorry if any of you are in the room. But who had scored highly on Cerebro. And then we let them perform for a year and a half. And then we went back and showed management, look, we have this way of testing that not only allows us to hire people who perform slightly better, but actually hires a more diverse population. Because the only way to tell if your stuff's working is not to train just on your employees. You need to, look at the people you rejected. You need to look at population. So that's the key, is you need to cast a much broader net than just your people, because otherwise you're just cloning yourself, and that's not a path for diversity and inclusion.
That's fascinating. I saw people listening to your keynote actually taking notes in your book, which is kind of a cool convergence. So I know people out here have questions. I want to make sure to open this up so you have a chance to ask Laszlo as well. If anyone wants to take the first question. Yes, in the back.
Well, I'm going to be sure. Oracle, thank you so much for being here. It is so completely informative. I'm from government, state government, but one of the things that we're wrestling with is sort of the ethics of technology, AI. The examples you gave where data creates an algorithm that they know has a bias, and that bias is creating harm that you could demonstrate by people either being denied an opportunity or unfairly being given an opportunity, yet the corporation knows and lets that continue. Is it government's role to begin to make laws on AI algorithms where we know companies are knowingly letting things continue that we know are actually hurting California citizens? And where should we be thinking about that?
Yeah, if companies are knowingly doing things that are harming people, absolutely. Because there's three responses. One is consumer behavior, which I talked about. People figure it out and get upset. The second is litigation. And the third is regulation. And I think a lot of technology companies are successful because the arbitrage they're playing, at least for the first 2, 3, 5 years, until they get to scale, is they're basically arbitraging that they can move faster than regulation, right? Hotel regulation, taxi regulation, or even how you let people sign up, how you make them sign up with a credit card, and then how difficult you make it to stop auto billing or something like that. So I think those are the three options. And I think right now, technology is moving so much more quickly than regulation that I think a little faster regulation would help. At the same time, I think regulation's a pendulum. And sometimes you need a lot more, sometimes you need a lot less. I think this is a field where there's enough potential to do harm. I mean, look at how our, how Facebook was weaponized during our election, right? There should be some regulation about that, right? So yeah, there's absolutely need for it.
Any other questions for Laszlo? Yes, sir, in the middle.
Traditional business. Thank you. When it comes to organizational behavior, I noticed that newer companies are developing more horizontally versus vertically, so more autonomy for the workforce, a little bit less hierarchy. And obviously motivations are changing in the new workforce. What would you say, other than money, will be the biggest motivator for the younger workforce?
It's funny, when you look at, so there's all these studies about, what does Gen X want? What do millennials want? Millennials are hard to manage. Those studies are typically point-in-time studies that say, okay, let's today go out and survey people who are 20 and 40 and 60 and see if they want different things. When you do longitudinal studies across time, so what did I want when I was 20 versus now versus, or my dad, the context has changed. So people 20 and 30 and 50 years ago didn't lead by saying, I want a meaningful job. Today they do, because unemployment's low, people have more options, and they have more voice because of our devices. So fundamentally, what people actually want, human beings want, has not changed. People want meaningful work. They want to be recognized and valued. They want to be learning all the time. So money's not the lever. Money you need, people need to be able to live, right? And maybe have a nicer life. But the main thing is the psychological piece. And the best way to unlock that is if you go to your organization, just ask people, why are you here? What gets you up in the morning? And Amy Rosinski's research shows about a third of people will have something tied to meaning. Start telling those stories. Or you can have people do a simple exercise where you say, with new hires, Infosys or Wipro, one of the Indian outsourcers did this. New hires start, first week they write why they joined the company, what it means to them. And the people who did that 18 months later had higher performance than people who didn't do that. And that was the only variable. So connecting people back to that meaning, and it's in their heads, it's in their hearts, and sharing that is the biggest initial thing you can do, and it's free.
All right, any other questions before we wrap? I have one last question, and it's one of the first stories I ever covered in Silicon Valley was a young company who on April Fool's Day had taken the manager's office and created a giant sand pit, and clearly because this guy loved Hawaii, that was Google in its very small days. I was recently at I.O., And everything I saw at Google's development conference was machine learning this, AI that. As opposed to back then when they found out the guy liked Hawaii and here's how we're going to get you to stay and play a little joke on you and put sand all over. How do you, at this influx now, or what is your advice when everything is going machine learning, how do we keep humanity, the things you talked about, culture, love, a human touch when it comes to growing companies? We obviously want to grow and we want to continue to perform well and innovate. How do we keep that human touch when everything seems to be going up on the chart of we have to go to AI and machine learning?
There's two things. One is just take a deep breath. Like in our work environment, there's all this pressure, all this drive to do things. Take a deep breath and remind yourself these are human beings. Like, put a sticky on your computer, put a draft, send yourself an email, something to remind you every day that at the end of the day, yeah, we're selling products, we're providing services, yeah, we're competing with heavily subsidized VC-funded startups, even though we're a mom-and-pop business. At the end of the day, it's human beings. And just keep that ever present and tell yourself, look for the stories about people you're having impact on, because that will ground you, that will root you, that will make you, that little bit of reminder, that nudge towards empathy will remind you why we're actually doing all these things. That's number one. Number two, a colleague of mine and I actually have been talking about installing a beach at our company. So stay tuned.
Laszlo, this is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Laszlo Bock, everybody.